Have you imagined what would happen if God called you to an impossible mission? How would you react if you had to bring a message of hope to people who you believe do not deserve forgiveness? That's exactly what happened to Ionas, the prophet who, despite being a man of God, made an unexpected decision. He tried to escape from the Creator himself. But what led Ionas to do this? And what does this have to do with your life? IT began when God gave a direct order. Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach against it, for its wickedness has reached me. Nineveh was a hard city, full of violence and corruption. For Ionas, there was no doubt, those people did not deserve mercy. And there is the most amazing detail, he knew God was compassionate, and that scared him. Jonah feared that if the Ninevites heard the message, they would repent and be forgiven. He didn't want that to happen. So, instead of obeying, he did the unthinkable. He bought a ticket to Tarshish, the furthest place he could imagine, in an attempt to escape from God. Have you ever felt like you didn't want to fulfill God's plan because it seemed unfair or impossible? Maybe you felt that someone didn't deserve a second chance, or even that your own life would be easier if you ran away. But here is the truth. There is no running away from God. Ionas boarded a ship, thinking everything was resolved. At first, the trip seemed peaceful, but suddenly a violent storm arose, so fierce that even the experienced sailors were terrified. Can you imagine the size of the waves, the deafening wind and the despair on the faces of every person on board? While they were fighting to save the ship, Jonah was sleeping. Yes, sleeping. He seemed oblivious to the chase, but deep down, he knew he was the reason for the storm. When the sailors confronted him, he confessed, "I am running from the Lord, the God who made heaven and earth." The silence must have been deafening at that moment. Everyone knew that if nothing was done, the ship would sink. Jonah then made a radical decision. Threw me overboard, and the storm will cease. And that's exactly what happened. As soon as he was thrown into the water, everything was peaceful. But Ionas did not find the end. He was swallowed by a big fish. For 3 days and 3 nights, he remained in the belly of that animal. Now imagine, total darkness, the unbearable smell of the muffled sound of lapping out. Ionas was completely alone, with no way out. He was there, in the most unlikely place, that he began to reflect. Have you ever felt trapped in a fish belly? A place where everything seems lost and there is no one to help. Jonah realized that even in those circumstances, God was present. He prayed with all sincerity, recognizing that only the Lord could save him. And God responded. The fish vomited Jonah onto the island, and God spoke again. Go to Nineveh and proclaim the message I have given you. This time, Ionas obeyed. He walked through the city, declaring that in 40 days Nineveh would be destroyed. And then something extraordinary happened. From the king to the humblest of citizens, everyone repented. The entire city feasted, cried out to God and turned to him. It was one of the greatest demonstrations of repentance in history. But instead of rejoicing, Jonah was furious. He could not understand how God could be so merciful. I knew that the Lord is kind and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love, Jonah said, filled with anger. To him, it seemed unfair that such a wicked people should receive forgiveness. It was then that God gave an unforgettable lesson. He grew a plan to give Jonah shade while he rested. Jonah was happy with the plan, but the next day, God sent a worm to destroy it. When Jonah complained, God responded, "You care so much about a plan that only lived one day, but shouldn't I have compassion on Nineveh, a city with over 120,000 people who don't know how to discern between their right hand and their right hand, the left?" And this is where we find Iona's secret. The story is not just about a stubborn prophet, it's about the heart of God. A God who loves both the righteous and the sinner, who offers grace even to those who, in our eyes, Simon Fergerbro. And more than that, it's a story about us. How many times are we like Jonah, judging who deserves God's love or not? Now it's up to you. What will you do with this message? Will you continue running away from God's plan, letting pride and resentment prevent you from fulfilling your calling? Or will you open your heart, knowing that the same God who forgave Nineveh also offers you grace every day? The decision is in your hands. But remember, God doesn't give up on you, and He is always ready to see you, no matter how far you think you are going. You may be wondering, wasn't Jonah happy with Nineveh's repentance? After all, he had just fulfilled God's will and seen an unprecedented transformation. The truth is that Jonah's heart was divided. On the one hand, he knew that God is just and merciful, but on the other, he had difficulty accepting that this mercy was extended to a people who, in his view, deserved the punishment. And we are not different. How many times do we see someone receive a blessing or forgiveness and think, this person, they don't deserve it? It's easier to point the finger and judge than to understand that God's plan is much bigger than we can see. And that's exactly what is needed to learn. But God is patient. He knew that Jonah had yet to understand the true meaning of grace. And this is where the lesson of the plant and the worm takes on even greater weight. Think about the scene. Jonah is resting, angry about what happened in Nineveh. Then, suddenly, a plant grows to shade him. It seems like a gift from God, something small, but it brought comfort in the middle of the desert heat. Jonah was relieved. Perhaps he even thought that God was on his side. But the next day, God sends a worm to destroy the plant. The shadow disappears. The scorching sun returns, and Jonah, once again, is furious. He complains to God, saying that it would be better to die than to continue living like that. And it is here that God asks a question that resonates to this day. You feel sorry for a plant you didn't cultivate. Shouldn't I have compassion for Nineveh, a city of over 120,000 people? This question is so powerful that it deserves to be reflected upon. God is telling Jonah and us that His love is not limited. It is not restricted to those we find worthy or deserving. God cares about everyone, even those who, in our race, seem beyond redemption. Now, let's bring this to our reality. Who is the Nineveh in your life? Who are the people you think do not deserve forgiveness? Maybe it's someone who hurt you deeply. Maybe it's you, stuck in a cycle of guilt and shame. But here is the secret. God's love is greater than any fail, hurt, or judgment. And speaking of judgment, we cannot ignore the parallel between the story of Jonah and the coming of Jesus. Just as Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of the fish, Jesus spent 3 days in the belly of the earth before being resurrected. And just as Jonah brought a message of repentance to save Nineveh, Jesus brought a message of salvation to the entire world. Do you see the connection? Jonah is an imperfect reflection of something much bigger. He points to the perfect sacrifice of Christ, who did so that everyone, without exception, would have access to grace. But Jonah's story ends with a mystery. We don't know how he answered God's question. Did he finally understand? Or did you remain stuck in your pride? Perhaps the reason the story ends like this is simple. Jonah's answer is not the most important thing. What really matters is our response. And now I ask you, what is your answer? Will you continue to run away from God's calling, trapped in fear, doubt, or resentment? Or will you surrender to grace and allow God to see your life for something much greater than you can imagine? Looking at Jonah's life, it is clear that God does not choose perfect people. He chooses ordinary people with flaws and fears to carry out extraordinary plans. Jonah was not a perfect hero. He was stubborn, proud and full of doubts. But God still set him. And the same goes for you. Эти даесент матрую you aurod you vedoni. God can and wants to see you. But there is a price. Obeying God's call means leaving behind pride, comfort zones and, often, the control we think we have over our lives. It's an act of total trust, like Jonah did when he said, "Throw me into the sea." It was in that moment of total surrender that God began to transform history. And that's what He wants to do in your life. But the question remains, are you willing to trust? Now, I want you to reflect on something. If God asked you today to forgive someone who shared you, would you be able to? What if He called you to bring a message of hope to someone you consider unforgivable? Think about it. Because the answer isn't just about Aram, it's about you and what God is doing in your heart. The story of Jonah is not just an ancient narrative. She is a mirror. And when you look into that mirror, what do you see? A heart willing to obey, even when it doesn't understand God's plan. Or someone still fighting against its will. No matter where you are now, God is ready to meet you. Just as He found Jonah in the belly of the fish in the deepest darkness. He hasn't given up on Yenas, and He won't give up on you. And remember, Yena's secret is simple, but transformative. It's not just about repentance or obedience. This is a God who loves without limits, who offers grace to everyone and who invites us to be part of something much bigger than ourselves. And now, the decision is in your hands. Do you see how the story is more than just about Jonah? It's about you, about me, and about how we often struggle with what God wants to do in our lives. Maybe you think Enoch's story is just an example of disobedience, but it is much more. It is a revelation of how God uses even our mistakes to fulfill His purposes. Think about the impact of Nineveh's repentance. The city was a powerhouse, a center of sin and violence, but in a single day, because of the message of a reluctant prophet, their story changed forever. Now imagine, what if Yenas continued running away? Would God have sent someone else? Would the 9 whites have eternal chance? These questions are profound because they show us that God chose Jonah for a reason, just as He chose you. Maybe you're thinking, but I'm not good enough. He failed so many times. But look at Jonah. He failed, he ran away, and yet God brought him back and to set him to do something incredible. And you know what's most interesting? When Jonah preached in Nineveh, which his message was not long, full of arguments or words of human wisdom. It was direct and simple. In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. This teaches us something very important. The power of the message is not in the messenger, but in the God who sends it. You don't have to be perfect, eloquent, or have all the answers. You just need to be willing. Now I want you to imagine the impact your obedience can have. It may not be in an entire city like Nineveh, but perhaps it will be in one person. Maybe God is calling you to talk to that friend you know is lost. Or perhaps He is inviting you to forgive someone who has hurt you deeply. Sometimes the most powerful message is the one that comes from a sincere and obedient heart. Returning to Jonah, there is something fascinating about how God treats our hearts. He doesn't just want us to obey. He wants us to understand why. Has Jonah, do you have reason to be angry? This question was not for God. It was for Yenas to reflect on himself. Many times, we are so caught up in our own limited vision that we forget to see things as God sees them. And this is what Yenas' secret really teaches us. This is not just a repentant city or a reluctant prophet. It is a God who invites us to see the world through His eyes. Eyes full of love, grace and compassion. Now, stop and think. How many times have you been in Yenas' shoes, caught up in your pride, resisting God's call, trying to justify your actions? Maybe you even obeyed, but without your heart aligned with His. The good news is that just as God worked on Yenas' heart, He wants to work on yours too. But this requires something important, vulnerability. You not only begin to change who and he recognizes which is inability to resolve things alone. It was in the belly of the fish, at the most desperate moment, that he cried out to God. And maybe that's what God is waiting for you. No matter how far you have gone, how deep you have fallen, he is waiting for you as ROI. And you know what's most incredible? The story of Jonah shows us that God does not give up on a disobedient prophet or a corrupt city. He is the God of second chances, both for those who preach and for those who hear the message. Now, imagine what your life would be like if you said yes to God's calling without hesitation. Imagine the impact you could make on those around you. God did not call you by chance. He has a purpose for you, and just like he did with Jonah, he is willing to get you, correct you, and to see you for something much greater than you can imagine. In the end, the question that echoes from Enoch's story still remains: how do you respond to God's compassion? Not just for yourself, but for others. Because, at the end of the day, the grace we receive is not just for us. She calls us to be a channel of transformation for those who have not yet met her. The decision is before you. And now, what will you do with in a secret? And now, I ask you, what are you going to do with everything you learned today? In a secret is not just repentance or obedience. It's about how God, in His infinite mercy, is always calling us to something great. So, if this message touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Leave your like in this video so that more people can be reached by this message. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, sign up right now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any content like this. You're here to share life-changing stories, and I want to walk that journey with you. And speaking of transformation, the next video will impact you even more. I will reveal how another biblical character defeated even more surprising challenges and emerged victorious by trusting God completely. Don't leave now. Click here on the screen to watch the next video and continue the series that will strengthen your faith and inspire you deeply. You can't miss it. Click now and discover what God has in store for you. See you there.